On April 6, 2026, 4 human beings flew over the far side of the moon for the first time in more than 50 years. And what they saw did not look like the quiet, fully understood world we have been told to imagine. It looked stranger, sharper, more active, more unresolved. For decades, the far side of the moon lived in science as a place mapped by instruments, modeled by computers, and explained through data. But the moment Artemis II passed over it with trained human eyes looking through Orion's windows, the moon stopped being just a set of measurements and became something else entirely, a place where old mysteries suddenly felt more real and new ones appeared in real time. What the crew brought back was not one shocking object. It was 4 different puzzles, each one pointing to the same uncomfortable truth. The hidden side of the moon may still be far less understood than we wanted to believe. The first mystery begins with one of the most beautiful and disturbing structures on the moon, the Oriental Basin. Imagine 3 nearly perfect concentric rings carved into the lunar surface, like an enormous target pressed into rock billions of years ago. From Earth, we can only glimpse part of it because it sits near the boundary between the near side and the far side. Robotic missions photographed pieces of it. Scientists modeled it. But until Artemis II, no human being had ever seen the full structure with their own eyes in real time. And when the crew finally saw it directly, the reaction was immediate. It looked too clean, too circular, too mathematically elegant for something born from chaos. The leading theory says a colossal ancient impact liquefied the crust and sent waves of molten material outward, which later froze into those giant concentric mountain rings. That explanation sounds reasonable. The problem is that no laboratory experiment and no computer model has fully recreated the precise perfection of what Oriental actually looks like. The geometry is too exact. The symmetry is too strong. The scale is too immense to feel accidental, yet the physics we currently use to explain it still leave gaps. That is why Oriental remains such a powerful mystery. It is not hidden because we cannot see it. It is hidden because even after finally seeing it properly, we still cannot say with complete confidence how something that precise formed. Artemis II did not solve the puzzle. It made it sharper. It gave scientists the first direct human observations of the full structure, and instead of closing the case, it reopened the debate. The second mystery came from another giant basin on the far side, Hertzsprung. At first glance, it seems like another massive lunar impact scar. But the deeper you look, the stranger it becomes. Hertzsprung contains 2 concentric rings of its own, but unlike Oriental, this structure has been interrupted and deformed by a later impact, the Vavilov crater, creating a landscape where 2 different eras of lunar history are literally superimposed on top of one another. It is like reading 2 chapters of the solar system's past written across the same page. This matters because Hertzsprung and Oriental together offer something incredibly rare, a direct side-by-side comparison of large impact basins in different states of preservation. One looks cleaner and more intact. The other looks older, battered, and partially overwritten by later violence. For planetary scientists, that is a gold mine. It means Artemis II was not just looking at scenery. It was witnessing geological time made visible. And that makes Hertzsprung mysterious in a different way. It is not mysterious because it is inexplicable. It is mysterious because it contains layers of history we are only now learning how to read correctly. What the crew saw there is already forcing scientists to compare decades of theoretical models with fresh human observation. And whenever that happens, one uncomfortable possibility always appears. What if the models are only partly right? What if some of the story we told ourselves about how these giant basins evolve over billions of years needs to be revised now that real human observers have finally seen them from the right angle, under the right light, with the right training? Then came the mystery that changed the mood of the entire flyby. During the eclipse phase, with the moon's surface darkened from the crew's perspective, the astronauts saw 6 brief bright flashes on the far side. Fast, sharp, unmistakable. These were not reflections, not camera glitches, and not imagination. They were real impact flashes, meteoroids striking the lunar surface in real time and releasing enough energy to become visible to human observers in orbit. Scientists knew such flashes were possible. What shocked them was the frequency. 6 impacts in less than an hour across the visible part of the far side suggests the moon is being hit more often than many current models would comfortably predict. And that is not just an interesting scientific detail. It has immediate consequences for the future. If the moon is being bombarded this frequently, then every future astronaut, every habitat, every vehicle, and every base design has to account for that reality. The far side is not just old and scarred by ancient violence. It is still being struck now. That is why these flashes became more than a dramatic moment. They turned into a warning. The moon is not a quiet platform waiting politely for human return. It is an exposed world, sitting in the middle of a kinetic shooting gallery, with no atmosphere to burn up incoming debris and no real protection from the constant violence of space. Artemis II did not just see the moon. It caught the moon in the act of being hit. The fourth mystery may be the most unsettling because it contains two different strange observations tied together by one idea. The moon is behaving in ways that human eyes noticed more clearly than the models had prepared for. First, the crew observed smaller, fresher craters that seemed to shine with an intensity far beyond what they expected. One astronaut compared them to tiny pinholes in a lampshade, bright against the darker surrounding terrain. The current scientific explanation is that recently exposed lunar material has not yet been darkened by space weathering, which would make it more reflective. But even with that explanation, the intensity of the brightness caught the crew off guard. It looked stronger, sharper, and more visually dramatic than the data alone had suggested. And then there was the eclipse itself. During nearly 54 minutes of totality, with the moon blocking the sun, the crew saw a luminous halo around the lunar edge. Thin, glowing structures, almost like delicate strands of light extending around the black disk. Scientists are still debating what exactly produced that effect. Was it the solar corona alone? Was it zodiacal light caused by sunlight scattering off interplanetary dust? Was it some combination of both? Right now, there is no final answer. And that is what makes this observation so powerful. Even with all our instruments, even with everything we know about eclipses and lunar geometry, Artemis II still captured something that the scientific community is actively trying to explain. Put those two pieces together, craters brighter than expected, and an eclipse halo still under debate, and the message becomes clear. Artemis II did not just revisit the moon. It exposed the fact that human observation, under the right conditions, can still uncover things that challenge the neatness of our existing explanations. The far side is not just where mysteries hide, it is where they become impossible to ignore. And maybe the fifth mystery is the most important of all, because it is not a crater, a flash, or a halo. It is the fact that trained human observation changed the mission itself. For decades, we studied the moon through orbiters, sensors, spectral maps, radar, and topographic models. And all of that data mattered. It still matters. But Artemis II exposed something scientists know and the public often forgets. An instrument records information, but a trained human observer can recognize when that information does not feel right. That difference changed everything during the flyby. The crew was not just collecting images. They were noticing patterns, comparing colors, feeling the scale of elevation, and describing surface behavior in real time in ways no automatic camera system could ever do on its own. That is why the mission feels so disruptive. These astronauts were not geologists by profession, but they had been trained for months to see like geologists, to recognize when one crater wall looked slightly different from another, when one basin felt more circular than expected, when one flash on the surface meant something operationally important rather than visually interesting. And once those observations started coming in, the moon stopped being just a remote object under surveillance. It became a landscape once again, something that had to be interpreted by minds, not just measured by machines. In a strange way, Artemis II reminded science of something ancient. Sometimes the biggest discovery is not what is out there, but what we finally become capable of noticing when we look at it the right way. So in the end, the far side of the moon did not give Artemis II just one mystery. It gave four, and maybe a fifth hidden behind them all. Perfect concentric rings that still challenge impact models. Ancient basins layered with two different eras of violence. Meteor flashes striking the surface in real time far more often than many expected. Bright craters and an eclipse halo that science is still trying to explain. And above all, The shocking realization that once trained human eyes finally saw these things directly, the moon stopped looking like a finished story and started looking like an unfinished one. That is what makes Artemis II so important. It did not land. It did not plant a flag. It did not bring back rocks. But in just a few hours over the far side, it did something almost more disruptive. It forced scientists to compare decades of models and robotic imagery with fresh human observation, and the match was not as clean as anyone would have liked. The moon turned out to be more dynamic, more visually complex, and more scientifically unsettled than the old simplified picture allowed. And maybe that is the most powerful lesson of all. The moon is the closest world to Earth, the object humanity has stared at for longer than recorded history. And yet it still has the power to surprise us the moment we look at it under new conditions, with new training, and with human beings close enough to truly see it. That means the far side is not just a place of hidden craters and strange light. It is a reminder that the universe always looks more complicated when you finally get close enough. If this changed the way you see the moon, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us, because Artemis may have only uncovered the first layer of the mysteries still waiting on the far side.